tax rates, exclusive of changing the AMT, that would spring forth
Oh,
growth
I
and
think
jobs?
on both sides of the aisle, the main elements of the economics profession, Alice Rubin specifically, agree we should have lower marginal income tax rates and broaden the tax base. That's behind the Rivlin Energy Plan.
Yeah, but that's a little bit different than the idea that if you cut marginal tax rates, the old Reagan idea that you're going to get more revenue than you would at the higher rates. I think that is subject to great debate. The other point that I hope we do get tax reform. I think we need tax reform. We at least need that debate. And I do think that the corporate income tax would be a big part of that, because while it is true that we have among the highest marginal tax rate on corporations at 35%, I believe it is so shot through with exemptions and other kinds of things that the actual paid rate by American corporations is right in the middle of corporate taxes in the world, advanced industrial societies.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question, and it's going to be distinguished economist, member of the Tower Center, and associate, Bud Weinstein. You're going to get the last question, Bud. As soon as you get a microphone.
This is the last question. I'd really like to go back to the discussions that we've heard earlier this day and talk about demography, economics, and China.
Okay.
Now, we know that the population in the U.S. is aging rapidly, and that's one of the reasons that 70% of the federal budget goes for entitlements, or at least half those entitlements are for two programs, Social Security and Medicare. We have 10,000 people a day going on Medicare. Resources are finite, as Dr. Chu mentioned. But it seems to me that resources are finite in China as well. And China has a demographic problem as well. And it's probably larger in magnitude, certainly in absolute numbers, than it is here. And that's their aging population. And they do not have a social safety net that's as well developed as ours. And it just seems to me, based partly on popular demonstrations in China over the last couple of years, there's going to be more pressure for the Chinese government and the party to provide more in the way of social services. And my question is, will that cut in to their ability to spend for military and defense?
Great question.
My short answer, I prefer to Admiral Walsh here, would be eventually yes. But as Lord King said, as you recall, eventually we're all dead. I don't think it will happen. I think you're absolutely right to point to that long-term China has very serious problems. Even short-term, I think there are serious governance problems for China because the model that is used, as you know well, to satisfy its population aspirations, which is high rates of growth with an export-led strategy, mercantilist in its themes, is running out of steam because the big market for those products in the United States has been cut off by our rediscovery of austerity. But I don't think it will. I don't think the demographic problem it faces. I think it faces much more serious immediate population satisfaction issues and the ability to keep this engine going the way it has been the last couple of decades. I don't think the demographic problem will hit soon enough to change the challenge that I think Admiral Walsh's comments properly brought up, which is China is, and other people have echoed, China is clearly a rising power. It wants to have more influence in the region. It is having more influence. The Australians have changed their policy from one that is clearly down the line pro-US to also accommodating China's rebels. Now, everyone has drawn back with the South China Sea episodes the last couple of years. They recognize the extreme desirability of U.S. security umbrella, exactly what that needs to be given Chinese ambitions. Now, what China will actually do about all this, which is unknown, remains to be seen. But I'm not confident it will rescue us from the 10-year problem we face.
I think there's one curve in demographics that will affect Chinese behavior that I think would support points that Bob was making earlier. And that's, China has not been tested with a one-child policy. I'm saying China has not been tested with a one-child policy. Mm-hmm. And And if you think about the last time China was in a land fight in 1979 in Vietnam, China went there to teach a lesson. And they lost over 50,000 lives in a very short period of time. And China thought they won because they had sufficiently taught Vietnam a lesson. With one-child policy, I find it very hard to believe that they are willing to take that kind of risk. Because if you look at just how the family works today, you've got one person supporting mom and dad and mom and dad's mom and dad. And he isn't too happy about it.
Anything else?
Can I just say one thing about dependency ratios, demography? Number one, for those who are interested in it, we're going to have a change in our dependency ratios that's a little bit disconcerting, but it's nowhere near as serious as what other countries are facing. But the second thing, you know, in the budget area, people like to use hyperbole because otherwise no one gets interested. And so we do dependency only in terms of workers or beneficiary with the elderly. But think about it another way. It's workers with dependency in terms of the elderly and also in terms of children. And that dependency ratio is changing in a different way. And it will be on balance that you're not going to have a terribly different dependency scenario. It will just be concentrated on one group to a much greater extent than it has been in the past. But your economic burden, so to speak, is not going to be dramatically different.
Any final thoughts? No? Okay. Well, we are going to, before we thank the panelists, I just want to say that we're going to have a chance at the end of a long day and absorb a lot of information. We can absorb some wine and beer over in the nice room where we had lunch. And I guess one thing we could do is take a vote, which is more exciting, strategy, forces, or budgets, I'm not sure, and how those three things are related to each other. So we're going to have a few of our distinguished panelists who will help lead us through that issue. And let's take a few minutes now and thank our panelists. Please join us.